can't use anymore. So, it's a different way of handling the situation.
Yeah. But it does work.
Huh?
It does work too.
It works.
Yeah.
It works when everybody plays the game, and it was all right.
How were things when you came back when the war ended? What were the times like then?
It was tough then.
It was tough then too?
Well, everybody coming back didn't have a job.
Right.
And some places took their people back, but the war had slowed things down to such a point where everything being made was being made for the military during the war.
And by a lot of women too.
By a lot of women, yeah. But you couldn't say that everybody had that opportunity.
Was there a big change? Were there a lot of women that left the job, the workforce?
Well, not only that, but you take places like anybody who's making airplanes, Curtis, and there was another big airplane place down at the Falls, and those people made a lot of planes, and they made a lot of money during the war.
Yeah.
They were rich.
Right.
Those people did all right.
Yeah.
And then, but the ones coming back from the war, what are you gonna do? You gotta go look for a job, man. I made out pretty well. I had a training in fixing teletype machines, which is what the phone company was dire in need from at that time. They had customers that wanted these teletype machines. And they had nobody trained or anything like that. The only people that worked for the phone company then were guys who put in phones, and you knew which was the tip and which was the ring, and you had to know where to hook the two wires, and you could be a telephone man.
And you know how to do this because you did communications during the war.
I was in communication all the time I was in there.
Right.
So when I went downtown the day after I come home, I believe, to get some clothes, because all I had was Army uniforms. I had to get a suit and some clothes to wear. And I went to a store on Main Street that sold suits for about $12.50 a suit,
Wow.
And I was in there getting a suit, and I'm talking to the guy that was trying the stuff on me, and he said, "Oh, why don't you go down the street there?" It was on Court Street, it was on Niagara Square, but across the street from Court Street. And he said, "Why don't you go down there and talk to them?" He says, "You might get a job there." So I went down there and I talked to the guy, and he gave me a little test. It was on AC/DC stuff, and it was an easy test, And he says, "Where do you live?" And I told him I was living on Philadelphia Avenue off Ontario Street. At the time, we rented a place there when we got back. And he said, I said, "I live on Ontario Street." He said, "How do you get home?" I said, "I go over the Grant Street car ran and go over Skillen Street. That's where it went. That's how I take that home." He said, "Well, good." He said, "Stop at Delavan, and there's a doctor's office right there." He said, "You stop there. I'm calling him, and he'll give you an examination." So I went and I had an examination with him. And the next day, they called me and said, "Come in to work on Monday." That was the next open day, That was one.
But you had to have a physical first.
I had to have the physical, yeah.
So I'm confused. The tailor gave you the job at the phone? The tailor gave you the job at the phone company?
He gave him the job tip.
The tip.
He told you. Oh, okay.
The tailor gave me the tip to go over there.
I see.
And then he took the test, and then
I had all the qualifications they needed because
Right.
I spent 4 years in the Army, and that's all I did was fix teletype machines all the time I was there.
Yeah.
Now the teletype was basically a telegraph that printed out words, right?
It was a machine that you could hook between 2 points and send messages back and forth on.
Yeah.
And then we developed it even further after I got there. We put hooked up the telephone with it, and then these people could dial other points, and not just the one point they wanted to go to. But a lot of big operating companies here, they would get a teletype, and then we'd have a private line going from here to Chicago or something, and hook up to some partner of theirs.
So it was constantly on. They were constantly connected.
Constantly working, yeah.
Okay. So it wasn't like a fax machine today where you would dial up.
No, fax came a little later. We went into fax after that because one thing, the teletype was limited to 100 words a minute, which was, after a while, when things got going good after the war, 100 words a minute was too slow.
Right.
So then they started going with fax. We did fax machines then. I never saw a fax machine in my life until I worked for the phone company. But,
what year was that?
oh, well, I got out in 1945, and the faxes came along about 49, I think.
Yeah.
And in fact, in the phone company itself, we used fax machines. They could take an order from a customer, and then to put a phone in. Well, then we had to send a copy of that order to the girls who made up the work order. But they had to know where the person lived, what cable went behind their house, what pair was open in that cable so that they could put that phone on that pair. And all that information went on. In a fax machine, they could put it all on one copy and send a copy of what they made right to them at the garage, and then all they had to do was give it out to some installer, and he'd go out and put the phone in. But it went like that for a long time. I can remember. Well, a lot of places around here, the small towns, were all individual with operators, You picked up the phone, you got an operator, told her who you wanted to talk to, and then she connected you through to another central office, and that central office would connect you to the customer. Like I say, it was all slow motion stuff, not like you had, So then he come out with dial telephones, step-by-step offices. You had an office where you had machines that were, when you turned the dial, it clicked back, click, 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 click. Went up 4 clicks, it took the little rotor up 4 clicks, and then you put the second number in, and it went over 4 clicks, and that's the way that went through, that automatic. You dial the 4 numbers, and you were connected right to the office you went to, and to the person you wanted was all in that. So that was great telephone stuff for a long time. That I had a job doing too. I put 2 of those offices. I didn't put them in. I was the approval on 2 of those jobs. The one was the VA hospital out on Main Street, and the other was University of Buffalo switchboard. They were all automatic, all them people, and it was too slow, and they had to hire people, and they want to get away from that, so they got into the automated stuff,
Yeah.
Became the thing of the day.
Did you help develop some of the new technologies?
Huh?
Did you help develop some of the new technologies?
I didn't develop it, no. But when they come up with a new technology, the phone company had a school in Albany, and they would take guys who were qualified. Not like I say, after the war, the phone company was limited to guys who were not eligible in the war, And they couldn't climb or anything like that, or they, for some reason, they were kept out of the war, but they never learned any more than what I'm talking about, tip and ring. That's what we used to call them, tip and ringers, you know. And they knew how to hook a telephone up so that, and there were 4-party lines, so you had to have some little knowledge on how to place the wires correctly for the party that you were putting on. In other words, there's party 1, 2, 3, and 4. And only one would ring when you called that number.
Yeah.
And it didn't mean that the person that was number 2 could listen in on it too, you know. So you had people listening to your phone call if you're on a 4-party line. You know?
Oh yeah.
Well,
That sounds like fun.
that they had
wasn't fun.
They had to get rid of that as fast as they could, you know, because
We had that out in Utah, and we had 8 people on a line.
yeah, that was, well, those
Horrible.
were mostly manual lines, yeah.
Yeah.
Manual, you call the operator. Williamsville was all the same way.
Yeah.
The town of Williamsville was all manual operation. When we come around to change that, I had a customer out there that was also had a teletype machine, and he was a salesman who sold lumber, and he got all his lumber from Canada. And the way it worked, the people in Canada would send him a notice on the teletype that they were shipping 4 cars of lumber, you know, and they'd give them a listing of what was on each car. And they wanted to put it in motion to send it to Buffalo. Well, they were building houses everywhere then after the war, so he had customers that wanted lumber, you know. But he had to find customers who wanted to buy what was on that car. They might have all kinds, 2x4s, 2x12, 2x, you know, they loaded the car. And then he'd find a customer who says, yeah, I can use that whole car. And he'd buy the whole car outright.
Okay, I have street clothes on.
And-
Yeah, but
And all kinds of businesses like that. And that guy would buy the lumber and sell it here in the country, in the state. Bring it to this railroad yard, and then they would get it. The customer would come out to the yard and get it himself, or have somebody come out and unload the car and bring it to his place. And but there were a lot of schemes there. The guy that used to do all this transfer work and buy the car from Canadian, he paid his bill when the Canadian dollar was below ours. He only had to pay him in Canadian money. And it was the other way around, you know, when it went up high, why, and then he'd hold up on it until he could get he used to tell me, you know, you got some money, you want to change it into Canadian money this week, it's going to go up, you know. He knew all this stuff ahead of time somehow. And so, you can make yourself a lot of money. I said, I don't have a lot of money, I can't change much, you know. I only made $22 a week.